just want to say a few things before we start, which is these films, I'll call them films, are not what I would call, they're not what I would call a failure to communicate. I'm paraphrasing and changing Frank Pearson's wonderful writing. This is communication. It's just the opposite. And it's 4 directors here and Alfonso at the top of their game. And so I think we're very lucky to be here tonight and to have them here tonight. So thank you for being here. And thank you for your work. There is a kind of interesting phenomenon, which is these are fairly dark stories. And, to me, it's a kind of a dark time. So I wonder whether that's sharing the DNA or just the artist reflecting like a mirror, our times, perhaps. I don't know. You can answer that one. I just want to also say, I've been here, working in the Guild, and a lot of people have asked why I do it, and the answer is really simple. I appreciate the opportunity to serve our members, and it's an honor, and it's a very humbling process. So it's kind of a simple thing. You get asked, and you say yes, and then maybe thank you. So tonight's stuff. It shares, the most obvious thing in common, which is they're incredibly well directed. It seems like the obvious thing, and they're also very different. The Penguin, we have 3 directors, and they work on an episode or 2 episodes, and Steve works on how many?
8.
8, and Alfonso was on 7. I think so. So it's sort of it's not a totally even playing field, but my questions are going to attempt to be as even and to deal with the art and craft of directing. And I'm going to start kind of the same question for everybody. So Helen, you're furthest away. And by the way, I know everybody here, and it's very nice to be up here for many reasons. So why did you choose to do the Penguin?
Well, when they first, I'd just come back from Paris from doing the New Look, and I was really tired, and I got a call from my agent who said, "You're interested in going in the spring to New York to do the Penguin?" And I said, "The what?" She said, "The Penguin." And I said, who, what? She said, the Penguin, the Batman. I said, "Absolutely not. I don't want to do a cartoon." And and that was that. And time went on, and actually right after Station 11, and 2 years ago when I was here was Station 11, my husband and I we were taking a road trip, and my phone went crazy because the director that had said yes to these 2 hours had arrived in New York, taken off their backpack, and their spine went out, and they had to get on a plane, go home to get surgery. And they had also just found out that Colin could not work more than like 2-3 days in a row because of all the latex and everything else. And so they really needed someone. And I'd never asked anything about it. And I'd worked with Lauren before, and she's an extraordinary human being and a really wonderful writer and a great collaborator. And so they sent me the first 5 scripts. And I knew Craig's work, Craig Zobel, who directed the first 3. And I think he's a fabulous director. And so I'm reading those 3. And then I read episode 4. And when I read episode 4, I knew I had to do this piece, which is sort of Sophia's origin story. And although I'd never met Kristen before, I'd seen her work, and I knew she was. Anyway, I felt her, and I just really, really wanted to do it, and that's what got me there. I mean, there was lots of gravy, the call, and like many other things, but the scripts were really good, and so I got on a plane.
Good, Kevin.
I think a lot of the similar things that you said. Yeah. But there was some kind of circumstance where I was stepping in, and my interest came off of my conversations with Lauren about the scripts and her point of view and how she was approaching the story. I have a friend who is production designing with with Matt Reeves on the Batman. So I had a lot of intimate information about that, and it seemed like an interesting world to get into. And then the biggest thing is I shoot a lot of different genres of television, and I hadn't done anything this big with this kind of scale, not since movies 20 years ago that I've been involved in. And I really wanted to get back in there and kind of learn what it meant to be on a set that was trying to produce these kind of scripts. So that was my reasoning. Yeah.
I may take a personal aside. Kevin did the music video when I did the film Up Close and Personal with Celine Dion. So I've been following his career, and I feel like a little bit of this is the benefit of being old, a parental pride in him.
I have to say, it's kind of like an All About Eve kind of not in the whole plot progression, but when I went, I had to go to his house to show him a cut. And I was like a green kid who had been shooting a lot of hip hop videos in New York. And I don't even know where I was, but it was like Shangri-La. It was this gorgeous drive-in area. And I was like, I've got to have all this. This is Hollywood.
All right. Jennifer.
Sorry, I had to say it.
Oh, no.
It's a good story. Yeah, I actually had a little bit of a similar reaction too. I mean, I got called and I was like, the what? The Penguin? What? They're making a whole show about the Penguin? Like and I hadn't seen the Batman, so I hadn't seen what Colin had done. I just was thinking of the Penguin that I know from comic books. And I'd actually been doing quite a bit of genre things, and maybe more than I thought I would do. So I was a little bit hesitant to do it at first because I didn't want to get pigeonholed that's all I do now. But again, it just came down to the writing. I mean, then I met with Lauren and Dylan Clark and talked to them and just heard their approach on it, and that it was not a comic book story. It was really a grounded, gritty, almost more of like a mafia crime story, and I really appreciated that. And then when I read the first two scripts, I was like, okay, I'm in. But I hadn't, I had to wait to get my finale.
Mr. Zaillian, sir.
What was the question? How?
Why and how?
Why and how? I was never interested in doing, like a remake. If it had been presented to me as a remake of a film, I wouldn't have done it. But I had read the book a long time ago and saw something in my head, and I hadn't written the scripts yet, but imagined something that was quite a bit different than anything that I'd seen before, and in the character too, the character himself. So I kind of tiptoed into it. I said, I'll write a pilot, and then I'll write a second episode, and then about by the third one, it's like, you're in now. So, and I think in terms of the directing, the same thing. I'll do the pilot. I might do another one, and I ended up getting very possessive about it, and decided to do the whole thing. And it's not a financially responsible way of doing a series because it's a lot more expensive because you can't, you can cross-board, which is good, but you can't do a lot of other things when you have multiple crews and so on. So anyway, so that's how I got into it, and I just felt that that story was something that, I felt in a certain way, and thought I had an approach to it.
I think you did. The character of Ripley. Let's start talking about the character. What interested in you? What did you see? And then how did you try to realize that both in script and obviously in terms of directing?
I like the character. I mean, I think I like kind of con men character, criminal characters. I've written other ones in my career, and I mean it's great drama, and I'm attracted to them. And Patricia Highsmith is, I think more than anybody else has created a character that it doesn't matter how many terrible things he does, you still want him to get away with it. And that was something that I really felt strongly about and wanted to explore. Like, how much can this guy do where we're still with him? And part of that is in the writing. A lot of it's in the writing, in her book and in the scripts, where we're always in his point of view up until the 6th episode. So we have no other point of view to be us. We are him to a certain extent, and then with Andrew, I loved Andrew because, listen, I mean, this is the sexy priest, the hot priest, and he's Moriarty, so he kind of ran the gamut of kind of like, the good and the bad, and that's how I always saw Ripley, was kind of this mixture of good and bad.
Well, I'm going to go down this with the Penguin as well. But how do you take a guy who basically has got incredibly good skills at getting out of trouble, but doesn't do such good stuff? I mean, he clobbers a couple of people, right?
Are you talking about Ripley now or the Penguin?
Ripley.
Ripley.
No, the Penguin. We'll get there in a second.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, if you read all 5 of the books, he only regrets one of the killings, and that's the first one. Because the first one is kind of done out of, I don't know, passion and stupidity and jealousy and those kinds of things. Every other killing is simply to not get caught. And that's true of all the other books. So he's not some kind of professional serial killer. He doesn't like killing people. But, when cornered, as he is later on in Ripley, he feels he's got no choice.
All right, Jennifer. Penguin. How do we make Oswald somebody we care about? Pretty rough character, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of that is, Colin Farrell's doing, but, we talked about that a lot because he actually, it's such an interesting character in that even within episodes, you kind of go back and forth of, liking him and despising him and seeing, these actually strangely positive qualities about him, and you feel sorry for him, and you all of that. And then my job in the finale was to try to turn all that had been built ahead of it and find the way to turn it and make you realize, oh, wait, he's the ultimate villain, because that's how we have to pass him back off to the Batman. So we really talked about that. And obviously there's like a key scene in my episode that really, really pushes him in that direction. But we were getting there, and it was interesting because Colin is such an invested actor that he just, was definitely getting darker and darker as we were shooting the episode. He was like going, he knew he had to transform into, the villain he needed to be for the Batman.
Kevin?
I'm just going to talk about the scene that was not the episode that is nominated that I really loved and kind of typified what I saw in the Penguin character that Colin created. It was the scene with his mom when he finds her in the bathtub. I don't know if you guys have seen that. And his ability and what was in the Penguin and the character he created to instantly have us empathetic and sympathetic for his circumstance, and for him to be able to toggle back and forth was a learning experience for me and a way that I went forward to realize the rest of the scenes. There's also something about working with Colin Farrell in that he does not wait for anything. He is like, I am existing in the real world, and you better be prepared to capture this in whatever fashion you'd like to do, but I'm not waiting for anything. And that was a learning experience for me. Probably one of the best people I've ever worked with. And, so I learned who the character was from Colin quite a bit.
Helen, Arkham.
Well, and Sophia, Kristen Milioti. Yep. I mean, this is her journey. Well, which is what we learn in the episode is, of course, that Oz, in order to get some attention and approval, actually ruins this woman's life, right? By telling Falcone that she talked to a reporter, and so for me, that the episode that I'm nominated for is very much her story, and in order for the rest of the series to exist, she needed to be full. And it was one of these great experiences of Kristen and I met each other. I got there was the second week of shooting. she'd only shot a couple of days. I'm looking at dailies. I'm going, and then I sat down and talked with her about it. And I said, so what's going on? And she told me where she was at in terms of didn't feel like she'd quite found her way into it yet, and was very worried because we had to shoot like 7 days after I got there. We had to shoot the scene where she wakes up from the flashback at Arkham, and she was completely freaked out by that because I wasn't really thrilled that I was shooting that 7 days later either. But but we found each other, and it happened on a lot of levels. One of it was simply as I had a sense memory of being in my 30s as an acknowledged actor, but who never caught the brass ring, and the bruise that exists in the almost there, the being stood up at the altar, because it's a very strange industry. And although lots has changed, a lot hasn't changed in terms of how women are regarded and all of those, and as human beings. Anyway, so we found each other there. But also, when I started working with her, and we had a few hours of rehearsal on the scene that we were going to do. And the more that I a couple of days before we had our first thing, and I started to sink into the material and the language within the material and the writing. And I realized that there was boundless wit in the writing. And so I was able to go back to her and say, here's the thing that I know about intelligent people. And Sophia is totally an intelligent person. So many of us, intelligent people have wit, and as children they have it to amuse themselves and to engage others. But it's a defense, it's a sword, it's a seduction, wit is, and it is in the writing. And it was a lovely moment where she said, yeah, but I go, Kristen, I've seen your work, the script, and you are why I'm here. Come on. We can do this, and we will have a ball. And we did. It was we had the best time. It was really freaking hard at times, but it was really, really good. And it was incredible to find that trust in each other and let it unfold. And I'm really proud of that.
May I follow up, like I'm a CNN anchor doing a presidential debate? No. When you shot her incarceration, that's something that's been shot many times, and those are challenging. And how did you decide how to do it, what to shoot, and what to leave out, and why? Okay,
Jonathan Freeman is a great cinematographer and a great partner to me in this. We'd never worked together, but we had a great time. How did I do it? I don't know. It all. I don't know how we do it. For me, it starts with mountain peaks of images that I want to have. That I.
Do you remember any images for that in particular?
Well, beyond what we just shot of how do you take a human being and make them an object, and when that human being's a woman, part of it, is looking inside of her and looking. I mean, but the images that God.
It's okay not to have one because a lot of this is unconscious choices.
Well,
but
a
rational.
lot of it is conscious also. I mean, like the mess hall. We had 3 huge scenes in the mess hall. I had a day and a half to shoot.
Those are much less challenging to me.
Okay.
Than literally how you take her in there, because whenever what's a universal grammar of a filmmaker? Someone walks in a door. Mm-hmm. How many times have people shot that?
Right.
How many times have people shot it in ways you go, whoa? Alfred Hitchcock in the early days changed the size of the door. Some are gimmicks, some are real, and they're expressing certain things. What you did was a choice, however you got there, and it was quite visceral, I thought. And if it's not something that you can say, I did it because of this, Okay.
These choices are made like I depend very much when it gets down to it. Like I knew that it was going to be handheld. I knew that it was going to be what I call rock and roll. I wanted uncomfortable frames. I wanted edges and eyes and pieces. And I know when I see it, sometimes I know before I see it because I put the camera there, but sometimes it is a frame that comes up that I say that comes up accidentally. It'll happen both ways. I would love to say that I sit and previs all of this stuff, but then that is also completely crazy to me on a certain level, because what happens in the space, in the time, is so much better and so much richer than I have a really rich imagination. But if it was just me making an animated film, which is what it would have to be, it is in the connectivity of the moment where you go, yes, yes, yes. And then there's things that I insist on.
Well, as an outsider looking at it clean, what was interesting, among other things, was what you left out. What we didn't see.
Tell me what.
No, it's what you didn't see.
Right.
And because of that, you implied a whole world.
Right. And then I had a great editor also that I worked with to
I'm not accusing him or her or them of being not great. I'm just giving you a compliment.
Well, thank you.
You know, and if you don't want to take it,
that
I take it back. No, I won't. All right, Kevin. So you
do that again.
Apologies. So you had a nice, jolly comic episode, you know. At least one of them, wasn't it where the two brothers are left down?
That's right. That's right, yeah.
So again, you know, these are obviously, I mean, it's part of the world of comics, which I don't know that I'm an expert at all or close to, but there's a kind of a hyperbolic nature to it. But killing your brothers is as bad as it gets, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, how did you approach it?
With fear, I think. I think I just wanted to say that there was this jazz thing going on with all of us as we were Kristen was going through some anxiety about what she had done, and as I started to see what you cut, I saw why, because she was having this kind of communication with the character that she was creating. So she had just done all that stuff when I showed up.
Yeah. Right.
So now she's trying to figure out who she is, you know, and I think that was also a time shift as well. So that's really interesting. And then I wonder what you saw when you watched the dailies. You saw how I approached. So it's an interesting thing that we all are working on the same thing. And there are certain things that Jonathan was doing that David Franco and I, you know, appropriated in the shooting style and that kind of thing. I was going to say that wow, I'm having a brain fart.
The murder of his brothers.
Oswald.
Oswald.
Yeah.
Cox.
Yeah. So that Oswald's, I kind of got inside his head and behaved as though he would in regards to shooting the scene that you saw, and a lot. That was a very complicated thing for me, and it was a very difficult thing to digest and not be very afraid of in regards to the logic. And it worked, and it was ultimately, even when I saw the assembly of it, I was very happy that it worked. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
maybe the question is a little vague.
You're saying
how did you approach shooting?
Yeah, the boys moment. We kind of always cringed in our production meetings. Are we going to get away with this? Is this going to be, what is too much? You know, and so there was always the intention to have authenticity to it and to give a completely rounded human being to Oz as a child, for us to have sympathy for him as his circumstance.
He's a cripple, you know. He walks.
Yes, he started with that. Yeah. Yeah, and you start to understand his story, and you understand potentially how he could have become the guy that he became. And then there is that kind of sociopathic outlier behavior, which is the ability to sit there with his mom, and all
that's
for the sake of having more love or attention, I think.
Yeah, part of what I find interesting is how you explore those kinds of things. Because when I look at stuff, usually, sadly, I can identify with most every bit of awful behavior. And I cringe when I say that out loud. I apologize, world. But and I try to see if I could understand it. So it's like, and in the best of all worlds, turned it into an active verb.
Yeah.
Like one of the things in Ripley is he's trying to survive. He's trying to get away. And by the way, he finds some pleasure. Like the scene you saw where he's imitating him is great. And it's, to me, very funny. But it's also when he gets caught, what are you going to do when you're caught like that?
Yeah.
What would you do?
Right.
What would you do? What would I do? And it's like, I don't think I could have done that. You know what I mean? And those pauses are microseconds that go on through an eternity. So it's turning as words into behavior, which is to me what directing mostly is about. But you chose certain things. For instance, when the gate closed, what's it called? The door to down below closes. He could have hesitated. He could have thought. He could have done a lot of different things. I don't think any of those were appropriate choices because of who he is, and you're defining him by his actions, and again by what he does or what he doesn't do.
I think just trying to feel the authenticity of the moment. And I'll tell you what, that kid,
You were great with that kid.
he was amazing. He had been in a film. I'd worked with Parker from Succession, the advisor. Oh my God, he's going to die that I've forgotten his name. No, very funny actor. In any case, the movie was called Palmer, and he had directed this little film called Palmer about a kid who was in transition in the South, and Justin Timberlake played the lead of it. And I was very interested in that young man and called about him and brought him, and he was so prepared and had so many ideas. And even that moment you're talking about, like that didn't come from, it wasn't a direction of mine. It was, I wanted to see what he'd do first because he was so thoughtful.
Very wise.
And that was something that he would do.
Yep.
Very
wise.
As he passed the gangsters, like he's being informed by the gangsters on the street, and he's probably playing a part of the gangster at that moment or something is telling him to behave like that, to don't look back.
All right, Jennifer, I'm going to take Kevin and take him out of his misery a little bit here. I'll try a different question next time. So you have I would call it a light scene. So first of all, you have the scene which you saw where, now, out of curiosity, why did you go for that out of focus image before she gets picked up by the police to go to real hell?
It was kind of just trying to put you into her mind for a moment there of she was really preparing to die.
So it was a subjective.
To say, I was trying to be her point of view and just have her be sort of letting go of the city and the world at that moment.
All right, let's get really ugly. So the scene by the water with Victor and us. This is a tough one. Let's start with how you got there to the water for the location.
Well, that location was really, that was actually, it was written that it was like in this dingy, like it was written by the river, because the river is very symbolic with the flood and everything that had happened at the end of the Batman movie. And then that carries over through the Penguin. And so we wanted it to end by the river and all that Victor had lost in that flood. But I immediately wanted it to be somewhere beautiful. I was, it was written that it was like down and dirty. And I said, but look at this beautiful tree arching. And, we've like found this very picturesque. I was like picturing, the still from Manhattan or something, of like sitting on the bench looking out. Because I just liked the contradiction. I thought it was a really important place because Oz did love Victor in a very strange way, in his way. And so I felt like he would bring him to like a weirdly peaceful, beautiful place. So that was great. Lauren really went for that, and Colin really liked it too. In my first meeting with Colin, I showed him pictures of that spot, and he loved the idea of going sort of against what what was going to happen. And then, it was like a big scene like that, you sort of talk around the event a lot at first. You're talking about, well, how much snow is there going to be and how cold. And we were actually worried we'd have to move it because it was supposed to be like 15 degrees at one point. But luckily it ended up being warm the night we shot it. But we were talking about, are you sitting? Are you standing? If you're standing, what's the physicality of that? And at first I kind of wanted them standing because I really wanted Victor to be able to struggle. I wanted him to be able to really put all his strength into it. And I felt like he would really, really fight, But then when we sort of looked at that, it almost felt like it was too hard for Oz to like hold it. It almost got to be too much of a fight. So we sort of liked the simplicity of them just sitting. And then the main thing was just we built that thing that they're sitting on as like a little pylon type of thing. Our department made it so that Victor could still like really struggle and kind of turn around and kick his feet and really try to, so you almost felt like he could really get out of there for a moment. And I just felt like Victor would really fight.
Well, there's a decent amount of struggle, and similar to the first murder in Ripley. Is that a good transition? So visual style, Steve, I mean, what you and Ellsworth did, I mean, it's just stunning work to me. I mean, just, breathtaking and singular too. And the role of that in the storytelling, because there was a deliberate pace and there were some surprises to me in tone, because I love tone. So I love your very dry, at times quite often dark wit, but it plays in black and white, and it plays in what I would call highly structured frames that are then lit with wow. So how did that evolve? When did that come to you? And was that always there? Or talk a little bit about that, because it's so singular.
I think it was. I mean, when I read the book, I saw it in a certain way. When I was writing it, I honestly cannot write unless I see it in some way. It's not always the way it's going to end up, but I have to see it in some way. We started scouting locations at the end of 2019 and scouted for a couple of months, and then COVID hit, and everything stopped except I could continue to do rewrites, and I could talk to my David Gropman, the production designer, and we did a lot of research in the period with photographs and really fine art photographs, photography, not snapshots, and I think that started to draw it down that road too. That the frames would be really important. The camera was not going to move unless it had to, and that people would move within the frame more often. And in talking about the thing you mentioned on the boat, that was always 35 pages in the script with no dialogue. And sort of every little moment was written out. And the same with the aftermath of the second murder. It was basically one of the main reasons I wanted to do the show, was that I could have 30 minutes of no dialogue, of only sound and only picture, and tell a story, which you could never do in a film, because that would be half your movie for two scenes, and it would never happen. And this allowed me to do that, and it was something I look forward to doing. Ellsworth looked forward to it. David Gropman, when he read it, he looked forward to it. So and the actors looked forward to also poor Elliot, who plays Freddie, had to be dead for on the ground for a long time. But yeah, that was really important to me, and to bring everybody on board, except our composer, because I didn't want any music. I just wanted sound. But to have this extraordinary sound and creating a world of the apartment, creating a world of the boat and the ocean, all of that was just really appealing to me. And so we took our time doing it.
And I'll bet what you wrote, you shot very close to what you wrote and edited very close to what you wrote and shot?
Pretty much in those cases, yeah. I mean, obviously the location of the apartment was different than I imagined, but a boat is a boat, so yeah.
Well, the Italian images are, as you describe them, they're like stills. But there's an image, if I didn't get this wrong, on the train early on in the movie where you're looking as the trains go apart underground, and then you're looking through one of those windows to another train, and that's a pretty moving shot. I mean, it's not a static shot, and yet the frame was somewhat static within this crazy, beautiful, evocative shot.
Yeah, the camera's not moving at all.
Not at
Actually,
all.
I mean, the camera is dolling like very slowly, like this, just to create a little bit of movement. But that's done on several layers.
Right. I mean,
You know.
I assume it's not practical.
Nothing's moving.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, it's a slightly different conceit within the same overarching architecture, if you will.
Yeah, but also there was something in my mind from the beginning too, was that we would see things in frames.
Right.
you know,
That's there.
and that was one of those frames.
Yeah. And just one more thing, because this is stuff that drives me crazy and I love, which is the light on those edges of those elements and the objects. And those, I'll bet you wrote those objects.
Which objects?
We don't have
Ashtrays?
enough time. Well, ashtrays take a very big role, but I mean, literally the paintings, the brushes, it's everything. And it's just, it seems very deliberate, but it's not just the deliberate choice of the objects. It's how the light kisses it and how much edge lighting there is on it, which again, in a static frame becomes more important, to me.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, and I started as an editor, so I knew a little bit. Terrible films if you look them up, but I learned something about editing, and that you can create movement in editing. You don't always have to be moving the camera to create movement.
Interesting. All right. And then one other thing, which is going back to the character, and the attraction to him and the ability well, let me go back one second. First of all, what you're talking about in the boat scene is 100% pure cinema to me. So for all you nerds like me, and I know some of you out there, and this is on Netflix. I mean, what else is there? There's nothing, So it's just an aside for the medium we're talking about, because I think up until, I don't know how many years ago, it wasn't known for cinematic elements. So when you talk about even the struggle or when you talk about going into Arkham, you talk about, this massive event down below with the floods and everything there. These are big, big canvases. You know what I mean? Now you can still have a big canvas and it doesn't necessarily have to be cinematic, and people can argue about what that is, but having images and action without dialogue, I don't know how you missed that one. All right. Now going back to the character of Ripley, did you have concerns about being able to stay with him? It's like 6 of the episodes are his point of view, and then you change.
It switches a little bit.
Yeah.
And it comes back.
Yeah. I always think of film as very similar worlds. It's not a real world. It's what you're creating. It's what you're writing, what they're performing, and the frame and whatnot. Were there issues in your mind or concerns or challenges that you were concerned about going in, and how did you address them, if any?
In terms of the character?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I can only go on what's interesting to me, and reading the book was interesting to me. Writing the scripts was interesting. I was fascinated with the character, and I'm not going to second guess it. I'm going to try to, in directing it, accomplish what I felt when I was writing it, and hopefully even more. But no, I'm not looking for moments to make him sympathetic. If he isn't,
Okay,
and plus I think some people think of the character not so much in my thing, but in other interpretations of the story as being kind of a nicer guy. He was always dangerous to me. He was a dangerous guy. He was the kind of person that you're glad you didn't run into while you were on vacation somewhere, and he did take advantage of people. He is a narcissist. I wouldn't say he's psychotic, but he's a liar and a narcissist. And to me, I'm not going to try to make people like him. I think by just watching what he does, you understand what he's doing. And it doesn't matter if you like him or not.
But
honestly.
like, for instance, when he steals the envelope in the beginning of the movie, or this limited series, excuse me, and then he goes to the bank and then it's sort of not working. You know what I mean? There's something very charming to
I mean, you can imagine yourself in his position.
Failed easily. At that.
Do you stay? Do you go? What do you do? So yeah, I mean, I think of like a movie like Raging Bull. Do you think they thought about making Jake sympathetic? I think that he is who he is.
Yeah, I think that the story was about a character who was challenging himself and you.
And there's something human in all of that.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't have to be like an obvious sympathy.
A version of I could have been a contender, taken a little further. One last thing. Did you rehearse a lot?
No, no, we didn't. We rehearsed a little bit just for a couple of the big scenes, but nothing was really accomplished in it.
Jennifer.
Yes.
So when you're doing this big scene at the end there, did you rehearse it? What did you do with it? How do you get that?
The scene by the water?
Yeah. I mean, that's the one that gets the most noise, right?
Yes, for sure. For sure.
Shocked the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Even though it was inevitable.
We did not rehearse it really in any real way. No. I mean, and that's, I would say overall, I don't think Colin was a big fan of rehearsal anyway. But particularly that scene, he was like, okay, this is where I'm going to sit. You know what I mean? And we talked about it. And we talked about, like, at what point should he put his arm around him? At what point, things like that. But they didn't even say the words when we talked about that because they just didn't even want to say them until they were really saying them, which was definitely the right way to go. I mean, when the moment that is in the scene right at the very end, when he knows he's really done it, but he's still got him in his arms, Colin has this moment where he looks up, and I remember the showrunner and I like just grabbing each other when we saw that happen. And it's like his face like transformed. It's like he literally became the Penguin. And I think, that's the benefit sometimes of not rehearsing, is that was just the thing that came out of him in that moment. It was so instinctual.
Did you prep any specific way for that scene with your DP? And in general, how was your prep with the DP?
Yes, well, I had, again, the Penguin had, many somewhat mishaps along the way of people having to come and go and being shut down from the strikes for a while and all kinds of things. And so Jonathan Freeman was actually going to shoot my episode, and then he ended up having to leave the show just for personal reasons. And Zoe White stepped in to be my DP. So we were both new to the show doing the finale, which was strange. That's not usually the way it would go. But what was great about it is we were so embraced by my fellow directors who were directing at the time when we showed up for prep. But also Lauren was very open to our ideas and was not like, okay, this is how we do our show. She was, I think the great thing about doing like a limited series is you can, it can grow and change, and it's not like a series that's kind of stuck in its vernacular of how it wants to tell the story. And I feel like the Penguin very much did that. It sort of grew throughout the series so that we felt like we were looking at what Helen and Kevin and Craig and were doing and kind of, taking the best bits, but then also feeling like we could, let it grow and let it become something else. So anyway, that scene, as I said, we wanted it to feel sort of oddly peaceful and tranquil, and we looked into, what those beautiful shots would be. We have these like French overs that we do, and that was something in talking about like discovering things on the day that I just was looking at when I was looking behind them. And I was like, if we frame the water up, it looks like they're drowning, like we put the frame of the river, it's above their eyes from these back shots, which I was like, wait, we have to get this. This has to be, because that's exactly what's happening to Victor here. So
that's the David Lynch as John Ford line in Spielberg's movie. Just one of the things, like, you go from that scene, which is, in terms of audiences, it's got to be shocking, to the dance hall.
Mm-hmm.
couldn't be different, right?
Right.
And where are we? I mean, we're in a reality, but it feels like it's a otherworldly reality. I don't know if those are words to describe it well, but it's very different feel to it. I think the music is different. And tell me about that, and how you shot it and what you're thinking.
Yeah, well, like you said, there is a little bit of a alternate reality to the comic book stories, and I what I found interesting about this, especially getting to the finale, as I said, we kept, and I'm not sure if this is what's going to happen moving forward, but we kept thinking of it as this episode was passing off to whatever the Batman 2 will be, so that we were kind of, it was so this show ended up being so grounded in so many ways, which I really loved, but there were little nods to that it's part of the Batman world and it's part of the, part of this heightened reality that we would just embrace that at times. And so, I mean, that's what I thought was really fun in doing the episode, was that letting some stuff, like obviously that scene with Victor needed to be very, very grounded. But then when we, get into the other scenes, I mean, Sophia puts on a show almost, for when she decides to torture Oz, and we really just let her really go for it. I encouraged her to be sort of as dramatic as she wanted to be and really enjoy this. This was her moment, you know what I mean? And so it was very like, stage lighting on her and let her just sort of, take over.
Kevin, you ready for me, or you want to kick me off this dais here?
I'm good to go.
You're good to go? All right. So you got the Penguin is sort of at his wit's end again. I guess this is similar to
Fisher Stevens. That's the actor's name that was trying to remember.
Oh, Fisher Stevens. That's funny. He's been around for a while. Yeah. That's funny. I'll tell you an aside about him after this is over. So, Sal has his mom, right? Mm-hmm. And we've got this proscenium scene in a way in that the room we've seen so many times, and again, it's kind of a verbal and behavioral torture scene where, in a way, as an audience, you're asking, how in God's name is Oswald going to get out of here, right?
Right. Sorry. So what's your question, though?
How do you approach that?
I'm confused what scene you're talking about.
When it's episode 7 when Sal has Oswald.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. Yeah. Because we shot 2 episodes, I have to toggle back and forth between those stories. So in episode 7, again, another very sinewy scene to construct. Which again, I have to nod to Colin, because he just says, turn the cameras on and watch me. If ever there were questions, he is really that guy where he will, but in constructing that, you said the thing, like you can plan and you can previs, and I don't come from that. I come from a much more improvisational kind of filmmaking. Of course, I am like an aesthete because I came from music videos in the commercial world, but I try to apply a plan that can be adjusted and still hold steadfast to my style. And I think with that scene, we had that space and we had an idea of how we wanted it to go down, but the blocking was very, very complicated, and we would just take out the things that didn't work or that didn't feel real in regards to the fighting or what would have made sense or the turning off the lights or any of that stuff. That's the scene you're talking about, right? Yeah. Because not the one where he's confronting him, he gets him the first time.
Right. No.
And again, it's really about, I think that thing I said about Colin doesn't wait for anybody and he sets the tone. And so you're in the excitement. You're in the middle of the scene. And I think my approach was to be in the middle of the scene and for the cameras to feel as though they were experiencing this stuff in a kind of shallow, short perspective. That would be the perspective of me here, where you're out of focus. And that brought it.
That's an answer.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the immediate.
That's a choice. Yeah. And again,
and I wasn't going to sit back and observe this theater of this.
But you didn't have an active camera that was telling the story by it being frenetic or whatnot. You had a different way of approaching that, which again, there are many ways to do it.
Right.
I mean, you know, what Steve's saying is he's a static camera.
Yeah, it's meditative.
actors are
I want to
moving
ask
there,
him
you know.
questions about that.
Yeah. Well, even looking at Quaron's, you know, the clip, you know, you got Lubetsky Chivo, who I've had the great pleasure of working with, by the way, when he works. Anyway, you know, you have this scene which is all done with Steadicam, you know, reminiscent of other scenes he's done, like that with Birdman, for instance. But when they go outside, it's a static camera within a frame, you know, so all of a sudden it's looking like Steve's work. Cut off.
Yeah,
exactly.
Super elegant, that thing.
You're cutting.
Not until the end are you like, this is one.
Yeah.
You're like,
No, you realize,
you're
right?
like,
That's
wow.
what I did. The same
There's
thing.
only one cut in that scene.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he's
Yeah. By the way, he does a lot of digital cutting, so he does morphs and stuff to get, you know, you know.
But I mean,
Yeah. I don't mean to give away his secrets, but you know.
yeah, no.
Right.
We know that.
All right. Well, speaking of secrets, so you know, let's go to you, episode 4 again, because I like that Arkham episode. And you know, who is she when she gets out? I mean, you don't have to answer literally.
When she gets out of Arkham?
Yeah.
Or when she gets out of the episode?
No, out of Arkham.
Well, when she gets out of Arkham, she is the person that we've met in 1, 2, 3.
Right.
But once she is remembered in 4
Right.
and gone through re-experiencing and actually come to the understanding that it was her father and all of that stuff, right? So she goes to the moment of her trauma and goes through all that she goes through in Arkham. When she wakes up in the doctor's office and she goes upstairs and she takes a shower, in that moment, she is, in fact, born into her power. Because now she knows. She knows how she ended up there. She knows from so many ways, and she comes down with an absolutely clean face and boy's clothes, and she looks like a 12-year-old boy, and she says, "Yeah, you know, men have always lied to me," and she starts there, and she starts to claim herself, and she says, "You're right. I need a fresh start," and she goes home, and she makes herself the way she wants. And she puts on a sort of Jean Harlow gone wrong situation, right? And she makes her eyes, and she comes down to the dinner and speaks the truth to these people. I loved you, and you didn't help me. I was innocent. And she speaks that truth, which frees her to then get rid of them all. And when she has, you know, she is now, and then in the next episode, she changes her name and becomes the head of that family. So she comes into herself, and I mean,
But one thing, I think
she's an icon at that point, right? I mean, that was a part of the intention. I mean, I realized as I got into this thing that, okay, we're making an icon here in terms, there's so few, listen, I'm not actually an aficionado about the comic book world or these worlds. It's not my métier, but I don't know many female characters in that world that actually, because the story also is very much about a female in a man's world and how she is treated and how she actually emerges with great power, I think, and a sense of humor about it all and a lot of style.
well, one of the things, I mean, I know your work and I know you.
Yeah.
But you know, this is what I like to call a present tense moment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where someone says what's on their mind.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't happen in real life that often for good reason.
Mm-hmm.
and it's part of the fun of film, theater, you know, novels, whatever.
Yeah.
And so here's this moment where she comes back and we have no idea what she's going to do. So you have a tremendous amount of suspense. And what does she do?
After showing the little girl the meatball in
Right.
in her mouth and all of that stuff, isn't it fabulous? I mean,
that's what I'm supposed to say to you. Yes.
Oh no, well, no, I as this all, you know, yes, as we discovered all of this, and like aren't we lucky? you take some. I know you write the words on the page. I spit out poems now and then, but I've never sat down and written 8 hours of anything. But like these black marks on a piece of paper, right? That comes from an imagination, but gets communicated that way. And we take these black marks on a piece of paper, and they go in and collectively and in a collaborative way, and individually, and focus then on the director. We make choices to turn it into a 3-dimensional world and capture that in a 2-dimensional. I mean, it's freaking awesome. So, and in that time, we can have these present tense moments and speak these truths in a way that, whether it is a very sophisticated drama, or a horror movie, or a thriller, or a cartoon, it doesn't matter if we are speaking the truth, and that the actor and the director and the collective can capture that moment of humanity, because these are all, we got 18 stories in the world, or 18 plots, and the rest are just the people, right? and that we get to say these things, and that our characters can say them for us. I mean, I think we're so lucky.
Well, again, I just want to hone in on this a little bit, because it's, you talk about her being dolled up in the Jean Harlow-esque world. I mean, there are choices along the way that create what I like say, suspense of form in a certain way. Why is she doing this? Why is she going from this childlike look to this? And I'm, as an audience, going, what's going to happen next? Which I like. I think that's good storytelling. And especially when I refer to a present tense moment where it's like you going, I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I mean, like, again, the clip from Steven, I'm going, oh my God, he got caught. He's over.
Right.
No, he's not over. Oh, he got out. Oh, he's good. Oh, is he good or is he lucky? Well, we'll find out. You know what I mean? And, to me, writing is answering a question and creating one at the same time. So if you do that, it's really good. So obviously in that scene, she literally says what's on her mind and what we all know. And then what?
And then she kills him.
But I'm saying
we don't even know that she's doing. What I love also is that we don't know. We just find her in a room smoking a cigarette and opening a window, right?
Right.
And leaning out the window.
Again, creating a question. What the hell's going on?
And then she takes the little girl out, and he said, "What? Ooh, could be
what
something
the hell's
bad."
going on?
And tells her a story, and tells her that she will look after her. And then we discover this marvelous skirt is passing over dead bodies, and Sarah Vaughan is singing, and she has a little, Jessica Rabbit.
There's a tonal element to it, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of what I'm getting at, because this is meant to be entertaining, and these are some tough situations, and yet they're entertaining. Why are they entertaining? And I'm not saying the goal is to entertain. The goal is to tell the story, and for the characters to act in a way that's appropriate there. But
the tone, for example, that whole thing where she goes through the house over the dead bodies, that was
humor.
Very intentional. Every one of those. Now, there's some shots that were planned well ahead of time.
There you go.
I mean, and
finally got to my question.
I knew for sure that the first time I was going to see the mask on her was when she opened the window now we see the mask. Up until then we've just seen the form and this little bug woman going around doing all this fabulousness. So to leave the audience with the wit of the character also.
Okay, that's a very important point to me about the Penguin.
Yeah.
Because the thing with Colin, I'm going to go to you, Kevin, is he's funny.
That's right.
Right? He's got a sense of humor, great timing. Yeah. You know what I mean? And he's in, I can't say he's enjoying being in this prosthetic makeup, but he's sort of eating the scenery and at the same time having these compelling personal moments. So here's his foil, who has this kind of cool moment in front of the whole family before killing them. And now, again, going back to that same scene, he's up against the wall. What is the way he acts? You know what I mean? There's like, you're just saying, how is he going to get out of here? So that's, if you would, the verb, how can he get out?
I mean, with Jess, though, I think I'm hearing and learning a lot and thinking about watching your dailies, and and I feel like your ideas were born out of Kristen, and the character and Sophia's character, and similarly for me, I was informed. I think I said this before by Colin and who Oz became. There's a moment, and I want to speak to Craig. He's not here, but he's a very important part of this.
He's been here before.
Yeah. I knew that I was hooked when he shoots the brother, and he does this little thing where he goes, "Oh shit!" I think he actually does. He verbalize it, or he just kind of
fuck.
fuck.
Doesn't say fuck.
And then the whole tone of the show, like where you're supposed to go from that moment. Like, okay, it's not taking itself as seriously, and there is room for where I do a lot of comedy. So for me, I'm always looking for those elements of where I can ingest, because we always are making jokes, in the most dire of circumstances.
That's how we survive.
Yeah.
Jennifer, humor. Colin, your episode.
I know. I was thinking that. I'm like, when do we have that much humor in mine? Because as I said, mine was sort of the turning dark thing. But yeah, I'm trying.
I think when he's talking to him, basically saying to him, Victor, that how much he cares for him.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, even the scene, there definitely was some humor in the scene where he's stapling himself and Victor's there. And that was a scene where, he's kind of half teasing him of like, oh, really, you really think you pulled it all together? Because Victor's basically coming back all proud that he really did get all these gang members together and they really were going to help him. They just couldn't get there in time. And that was definitely something where you got to see, and that was important to like just establish like how deep their relationship had gotten, obviously, before we got to the later scene. But Colin definitely was going crazy with that stapler and with the pouring alcohol. He kept being like, "Bring me more. I need more bottles of things to pour on me." And Victor's trying to be very serious in that moment. So it was a nice way to have you see that
tones.
Yeah, exactly. Have you see that lighter side of the Penguin in there.
All right, Zaillian.
What?
Getting rid of bodies.
Oh, yeah.
Getting rid of bodies is part of, I think, film lore. And, with your static frame and Andrew having to get rid of the body on the stairs.
Yeah.
This again, to my sense of humor, which might be
I think
dark.
it's funny. A cat watching you do it, the only witness. But
the cat spoke a lot of dialogue.
Yeah, the cat. When I was talking before about those two sequences, the sound is so important, and the way we shot
the
it
head.
And
that was very intentional, right?
The intentional, all those things. But the other thing that appealed to me was the real time aspect of it. That I thought, okay, it's going to take him 30 minutes to get this body out of this apartment, and it took 30 minutes. It's like that's how long it takes. Right. Same with the boat. I got to throw this guy out of a boat. How long could that take? Well, it ends up taking 25 minutes. So to try to see if we could kind of keep an audience hopefully interested in the minutia of what it really takes to get rid of a body. And that was something from the very beginning. I thought, it was kind of a mantra. It was like, I've said before, I wrote on a Post-it, it's easier to kill somebody than it is to get rid of their body. And we're going to show that. And I don't know if people really notice it, but in the apartment building that he lives, where he's got to take this body out, you only ever see one neighbor in the entire thing. So the feeling that there's other people in this building and that any one of them can open the door at any time and see him is completely in our imaginations because we've never seen it.
And it's not something you dealt with in sound.
Yes, the sound was super.
Why don't you go and talk about your ornery OMD?
Oh yeah. We no. The sound is super important in a sequence like that, and we spent a lot of time, the editors and myself, actually doing a really, pretty thorough, avid mix, because so much of the storytelling relied on the sound, and so it was impossible to prove to ourselves that we thought it was working without doing that. So then after that, when you get all of the sound guys involved, part of it is a matter of recapturing that, and part of it is their abilities to enhance upon it, which they did. And it's an involved process, and it's not something I think in television you usually get as much time as we got.
Well, I think you're right, but I also think, again, it's, to me, this command you have of these cinematic filmic elements, which is because the frames are static, because the light is very as a kind of directional quality to it, and pulls objects out. If I'm saying it, I don't know if I'm saying it that well. Your attention is riveted on detail, and part of those details are sound.
Yeah. So
the head thud, it's a pretty big deal. I mean, in a theater, you'd get a big laugh on that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right. And,
oh yeah.
I am a failed.
We spent a lot of time on that.
Failed stand-up comic, and so I make movies that are dramatic and have a lot of humor in them.
Yeah.
Under the theory that if they're dramatic, people laugh just to get rid of the tension that's hiding.
Yeah.
But that's those are little things that, again, are both part of the reality, how you get a body down there. And again, part of why I'm saying it is because we've seen it so many times, and this was different.
But I mean, there's a lot of planning and planting of daggers and things that go into it that you don't really notice as it's happening. But to establish this elevator that works sometimes and doesn't work other times, and that's okay if it's not working, I'll just take the stairs. And that's, it's kind of going in seamlessly, I think, until that moment when it stops. And it's like, of course, that was inevitable that it was going to stop, because we saw all the little steps along the way.
And that sound of that elevator is very familiar to me, having traveled a bit.
Finding that elevator was not easy.
Oh, that must have been tricky.
A lot of them have been replaced.
Yeah. All right. I am being told that we will resume this tomorrow at 8:30. Okay. Steve had a 2.5-hour drive over here, so I think you can leave at 5 and be safe getting here. No, this is it. Thank you for what I think was a very illuminating talk.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.